I had just picked up a load in Los Angeles with a final destination in San Francisco. The warehouse employee, a thin guy with a hurried look, informed me that the cargo consisted of mannequins destined for a new store opening in the city center. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, as in my trucking career I've hauled a bit of everything, from electronics to old furniture, and even some loads I preferred not to know the contents of. I checked the delivery list and counted each mannequin as they were loaded into the truck. There were a total of 25 pieces, all packed in cardboard boxes with bubble wrap and sealed with tape. Each box was carefully labeled, indicating specific body parts or complete mannequins. Once everything was loaded, I gave one last look to ensure the cargo was secured. Previous experiences had taught me that a poorly sealed container could result in damaged goods, something I wanted to avoid at all costs. Besides, with the rain forecasted for the night, it was crucial to ensure nothing got wet. After securing the container, I climbed into the truck's cab and started the engine, feeling the familiar rumble of the diesel engine bringing the vehicle to life. I started the trip at dusk, watching as the city lights slowly came on, as twilight gave way to night. I was eager to deliver these mannequins and get the job over with. There was something about mannequins that always made me a bit uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way they seemed to watch everything with their hollow eyes, or how the light sometimes cast strange shadows on their expressionless faces. Either way, I was ready to get rid of this load as quickly as possible. With the destination address set in the GPS and a long night of driving ahead, I tuned the radio to a country music station, settled into the seat, and headed onto the road, leading to San Francisco through the night. The drive along the I-5 highway was smooth, with little traffic and a starry night overhead. The road, illuminated only by the truck's headlights, stretched like a river of dark asphalt ahead of me. I had planned to make just one stop for coffee and to stretch my legs, but life, as always, had other plans. It was nearly midnight when the first raindrops started to fall, marking the beginning of a storm that promised to be strong. I increased the speed of the windshield wipers and slowed the truck down, keeping a safe distance from the few vehicles sharing the road with me. The country music playing on the radio was now mixed with traffic reports and weather alerts. That's when I heard it for the first time, a low, almost muffled sound, as if something was lightly tapping against the inside of the container. At first, I thought it was just the rain hitting the metal, or maybe some piece of equipment that hadn't been secured properly. But as the rain subsided, the sound persisted, more distinct now, like deliberate knocks. Must be something loose, I murmured to myself, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. I decided I would stop at the next station to check the load. I didn't want to risk damaging the mannequins or having the cargo come completely loose. When I finally stopped, it was almost 1 a.m. The gas station was practically empty, illuminated by fluorescent lights that gave the place a ghostly tone. I turned off the engine and grabbed my flashlight, the sound of my boots on the wet asphalt echoing in the night's silence. I opened the container with a sense of hesitation. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the mannequin, boxes seemingly as I had left them. For a moment, I thought I had worried for nothing. Then I heard it again, clearer this time, the sound of something knocking from the back of the container. My heart raced as I walked between the boxes, the flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. When I reached the end of the container, I stopped, abruptly. It wasn't the boxes making the noise, it was something or someone knocking from inside one of them. My first instinct was to back away. My heart pounded in my chest as my mind tried to process what was happening. Something inside one of the boxes was moving, knocking on the cardboard walls with enough force to be heard through the container. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight tightly, trying to illuminate every dark corner ahead of me. I cautiously approached the box from which the sounds were coming. It was slightly apart from the others, hidden behind some larger ones. The label was facing down, making it impossible to see what it was supposed to contain. With a trembling breath, I dragged the box to a more illuminated spot and, using a pocket knife, cut the tape that sealed it. The noise stopped as soon as I placed my hand on the lid. A heavy silence fell over the container, so thick I could feel its weight. Slowly, I lifted the lid and peered inside, expecting to find something, maybe an animal trapped by mistake. But there was none of that. Instead, I saw one of the mannequins, but not like the others I was transporting. This one looked different. Its plastic eyes were open, wide open, and there was an expression on its face that looked like fear, almost human. It seemed as if it had been trying to escape from the position it had been placed in. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. It didn't make sense. Mannequins don't change expressions, they don't have emotions. But the light of my flashlight clearly revealed the terror in its face. Not wanting to stay another second in that place, I quickly closed the lid and shoved the box back into place. My whole body was shaking as I closed the container and locked it more forcefully than necessary. I got back into the truck, trying to shake off the thoughts of what I had seen. I started the engine and left the gas station as quickly as possible. I needed to put some distance between me and that load, at least until I could deliver everything in San Francisco and forget what had happened. But as I drove down the dark, empty road, the knocking started again, louder this time, more desperate. It was as if whatever I had seen was trying to tell me something, or as if it was trying to escape. The knocking continued, growing louder with each passing moment, reverberating through the confined space of the container and invading the cab of the truck, where I struggled to focus on the road ahead. Each thump sent a chill down my spine, a constant reminder of the unsettling cargo I was hauling. Despite the fear gripping me, I decided I would not open the container again. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to see those terrified eyes again. The night dragged on, and with it my anxiety grew. The road seemed never-ending, each mile stretching out longer than the last. Exhaustion hit hard, but the fear of stopping and confronting the container again kept me awake. At every gas station I passed, I thought about stopping, asking for help, but what would I say? That my cargo was alive? That mannequins were trying to communicate? No one would believe me. I'd be laughed at, or worse, they'd think I was delirious from lack of sleep. So I kept driving, gripping the steering wheel tightly enough to make my hands hurt, my eyes fixed on the road unfolding under the headlights. The music had long been turned off, replaced by the relentless sound of the knocking. Finally, the first light of dawn began to color the sky a pale blue. San Francisco was near, and with it, the promise of getting rid of that cursed load. As I entered the city, the traffic began to pick up, a comforting reminder of normality that helped calm my tormented spirit a little. I arrived at the warehouse early in the morning. The employee who came to receive the load looked surprised at my visibly exhausted state. Without waiting for help, I quickly opened the container and, without looking back, started unloading the boxes. The employee tried asking a few questions, probably concerned about my rush and worn appearance, but I ignored him, focused only on getting rid of the mannequins as quickly as possible. When the last box was removed, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. I informed the employee that all items had been delivered, signed the necessary papers, and returned to the truck without saying a word. As I started the engine, I took one last look at the warehouse. There were no goodbyes or glances back. I just wanted to put as much distance as possible between me and those mannequins. I drove back home in an almost automatic state, the events of the previous night spinning in my mind. I decided that after that trip, I needed some time away from the roads, maybe even look for a new type of work, something far away from mysterious cargo and inexplicable knocks in the night. I was driving along Route 66 in the middle of Arizona on a dark, moonless night. The only light came from the headlights of my truck, cutting through the blackness as I headed to my next delivery. Suddenly, I came across a barrier in the middle of the road that definitely wasn't there the last time I passed by, about a week ago. The barrier was solid, made of tree trunks and large rocks, completely blocking the way. There was no way to continue without getting out to deal with it. I stepped out of the truck, grabbed my flashlight, and started inspecting the situation. The area was remote, no cell service, and the nearest sign of civilization was a small town, a few miles away. As I assessed the barrier, I heard a noise coming from the woods next to the road. It sounded like branches snapping, as if something or someone was moving through there. I aimed my flashlight towards the noise, but the dense vegetation kept me from seeing anything clearly. The sound stopped suddenly, leaving only the silence of the night and the occasional whistle of the wind. I decided the best thing to do was to start removing the logs and rocks. With some effort, I managed to move the first pieces, thankful for the physical training I'd gotten from my routine of loading and unloading cargo. Every time I dragged a log to the side, I glanced around, feeling a strange sensation that I was being watched. After a few minutes of hard work, a fog began to form, quickly lowering and reducing my visibility to almost nothing. The environment grew even more eerie, and I sped up, trying to clear the path as fast as possible. Just as I was removing a large log, I heard the sound of movement again, this time closer. I pointed my flashlight in the direction of the noise, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something moving between the trees. My heart raced, and a sense of urgency took over me. I decided I needed to finish quickly and get out of there. I cleared enough space to pass through with the truck and ran back to the cab, locking the door as soon as I got inside. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that the fog now completely covered the area where the barrier had been, as if it was hiding something. I started the truck and pulled away as fast as I could, the feeling of being watched only fading once I finally reached the road lit by the streetlights of the town ahead. After leaving the barrier and the strange fog behind, I continued down the road, trying to relax and focus on the trip. It didn't take long for the accumulated tension to weigh down on me, and the need for a place to rest became more urgent. I decided to stop at the next gas station for some coffee and to stretch my legs. But before I could reach any station, a dim light caught my attention on the side of the road. It was a narrow trail leading into the woods with a weathered wooden sign that read Hope Village. Curiosity and the desire to understand more about the area, perhaps even to ask about the barrier, made me consider taking the detour. With a resigned sigh, I turned onto the trail, guiding the truck along a path that quickly proved to be narrower and less maintained than it had initially appeared. After a few minutes of cautious driving, the trees began to open up into a small village that looked like something out of another era. Wooden houses with thatched roofs and a small square with a dry fountain formed the heart of the village. There were no signs of modern cars or any recent technology. Everything looked incredibly well preserved, like a piece of history forgotten. As soon as I parked the truck, a group of villagers approached. They were people of various ages, dressed in simple but clean and well-kept clothes. An older man, with grey hair and a wide smile, introduced himself as Mr. John, the village leader. With a warmth I hadn't encountered in a long time, he invited me to have dinner with them, insisting that it was dangerous to travel through the night. Moved by a mix of gratitude for their hospitality and interest in the peculiarity of the place, I accepted the invitation. We dined on simple but delicious homemade food, and we talked about life in the village. They didn't speak much about the outside world, focusing instead on the joys and challenges of their isolated life. As the evening wore on, Mr. John started talking about how the village was a good place to live, mentioning how some visitors had decided to stay, finding peace and purpose there. He looked at me with an intensity that began to make me uncomfortable, his words hinting at an invitation for me to consider doing the same. The situation started to make me uneasy. The initial hospitality now seemed like a veiled effort to convince me to remain in the village. When I mentioned that I needed to continue my trip early in the morning, I noticed an exchange of glances among the villagers. The friendly atmosphere began to grow tense, and a sense of being trapped in something I didn't fully understand started to build inside me. As the conversation unfolded, Mr. John and the other villagers became increasingly insistent that I consider staying in the village. They spoke of the difficulties of modern life, the chaos of big cities, and how in Hope Village I could find refuge from all of that. Apparently, several visitors had become permanent residents after discovering the peace the place offered. Despite their kindness, an internal alarm began to sound in my mind. Something didn't feel right. The way some of them looked at me, almost as if they were evaluating me, and the insistent attempts to persuade me, started making me uncomfortable. I tried changing the subject, asking about the barrier on the road and if they knew anything about it. Their reaction was immediate and somewhat evasive. Mr. John just shook his head, saying that sometimes trees fell onto the road due to the weather, but nothing more. I noticed a quick exchange of looks between the villagers, as if they were sharing a secret they didn't want to reveal. That moment made my suspicion grow even more. As the night wore on, I grew increasingly anxious to leave. The initial hospitality had turned into a subtle but firm pressure for me to integrate into their community. When I mentioned that I needed to go to sleep because I planned to leave early the next morning, Mr. John offered me a place to stay in one of the village's vacant houses, just to get a feel for what it's like to live here, as he put it. Thanked him, but declined, insisting that I preferred to sleep in my truck. Mr. John seemed disappointed, but he didn't press the matter any further. He escorted me back to where my truck was parked, wishing me a good night with a smile that, though friendly, carried a weight I couldn't decipher. Back in the truck, I locked the doors and lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Why were they so insistent that I stay? What was the secret behind that barrier and the village's isolation? The feeling of being watched persisted, and I spent every moment looking out the truck's windows, expecting to see something or someone outside. I decided that when the sun rose, I would leave immediately, regardless of their insistence for me to stay. Hope Village, though peaceful at first glance, hid something I wasn't willing to discover. The night slowly gave way to dawn, and with a mix of apprehension and determination, I began preparing to leave Hope Village. Despite the kindness and strange offers from the villagers, something inside me screamed that I needed to hold on to my freedom, my life on the road. I started the truck while it was still dark, trying to make as little noise as possible so as not to draw the villagers' attention. I glanced in the rearview mirror and noticed a few figures starting to appear among the houses, moving slowly in my direction. I didn't want any confrontations or arguments. I just wanted to get out of there. When I reached the village's exit, I saw that the barrier of logs was still there, blocking the way. Without hesitation, I got out of the truck and began quickly removing the logs. The cool morning air gave me the energy I needed, and the urgency of the situation gave me strength. Mr. John appeared as I worked. "You don't have to go," he said, his calm voice contrasting with the firmness of his words. "Here, you could find peace, a life free from the chaos of the big cities." I stopped and looked him directly in the eyes. "I appreciate your hospitality, and for offering me a place here," I responded, keeping my tone respectful but firm. "But my life is out there, on the roads. I can't stay." Sensing my determination, Mr. John took a step back, slowly nodding his head. "Then go safely, my friend. The road is calling, and it's your choice to follow it." Once the way was clear, I quickly got back into the truck, started it up, and didn't look back. As I drove away from the village, I felt a mix of relief and strange sadness. The road ahead was open, and the light of dawn was beginning to bathe the landscape. I knew I might never come across a place like Hope Village again, and part of me wondered if I had made the right choice. But as the village disappeared in my rearview mirror, I felt a familiar sense of freedom that only the open road could offer. That was my home, my destiny, always changing, always ahead. And as the sun rose, marking the beginning of a new day, I kept driving, ready for whatever the road had in store. Hope Village was now just a memory, a brief detour in the long journey of my life. It was one of those nights with heavy rain that makes anyone think twice before leaving home. I was on Interstate 5, coming back from a delivery down south, with the truck's cab all to myself and the sound of the tires on the wet road as my only company. The road was almost deserted, which wasn't surprising for a night like that. It was past midnight when I saw a figure waving by the side of the road. I slowed down, still unsure about what to do. It was a man, completely soaked, without a raincoat, just standing there in the middle of nowhere. Against my better judgment, I stopped and opened the door for him. "Need a ride?" I asked, and the man, visibly relieved, just nodded as he climbed in. As soon as he settled into the seat next to mine, I closed the door and turned my attention back to the road. The man was shivering from the cold, his teeth chattering steadily. "You look frozen, man. Want me to turn up the heat?" I offered, already reaching for the controls without waiting for a reply. He just nodded again, pulling his wet coat tighter around him, though it was so soaked that it did little to warm him up. "Where did you come from on a night like this?" I asked, trying to break the ice and fill the silence that was starting to feel uncomfortable. The man looked at me with a distant gaze, as if he needed a moment to come up with an answer. "Oh, I was visiting a friend and lost track of time. The rain started, and there were no more buses running. Thanks for stopping. A lot of people wouldn't have done that." His gratitude sounded sincere, but his voice carried a weight, as if each word was an effort. I decided not to press him with more questions. The rain was getting heavier, pounding against the windshield, and my focus needed to stay on the road. Still, as the wipers worked relentlessly, a part of me couldn't help but wonder what kind of stories this stranger might have. As the road disappeared under the veil of heavy rain, the silence between us became more palpable. My passenger, who had introduced himself simply as Charlie, seemed lost in thought, staring out the window as if each raindrop carried a distant memory. I kept my eyes on the road, but my curiosity about him grew. After several miles of almost deafening silence, Charlie began to speak. I hadn't asked anything, he just started talking. He talked about roads he knew, about journeys he had taken. But these weren't ordinary travel stories. They leaned toward the eerie. He mentioned drivers who had picked up hitchhikers on rainy nights like this one, and how those encounters sometimes ended in ways you wouldn't expect. Charlie told a story about a driver who had picked up a woman on this very road, and how she had vanished from the car without a trace, leaving behind only a damp scarf. Another story was about a young man who gave a ride to a hitchhiker claiming to know shortcuts along a secondary road. The driver was never seen again. Charlie's stories brought a heavy atmosphere into the truck. Each tale was told with vivid detail that made you feel like you were there, watching the events unfold. As he spoke, the rain seemed to respond, intensifying and subsiding as if punctuating the narratives. As I listened, I couldn't help but feel an occasional chill. The stories were intriguing, but there was something deeply unsettling about them. Maybe it was the way Charlie told them, with a calm, almost detached voice. Or maybe it was the vacant look that accompanied his words. These weren't just tales to pass the time. They felt more like warnings or maybe confessions. Even so, I didn't interrupt, nor did I question the truth of what even so I didn't interrupt, nor did I question the truth of what he was saying. Part of me didn't want to know more, while another part was completely drawn in by the web of his words. As he spoke, the road ahead seemed more and more desolate, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Charlie's stories filled the space, creating an atmosphere I wasn't sure I wanted to escape from, even if I could. The night dragged on, and with each story Charlie told, it felt like more darkness seeped into the cab of the truck. The rain still pounded hard against the windshield, and the monotonous rhythm of the wipers became a sinister accompaniment to his narratives. As he spoke, the road seemed increasingly isolated, as if we were drifting away from reality into some suspended place outside of time and logic. When Charlie began to tell the story of a truck driver who vanished after picking up a strange passenger, I felt a chill run down my spine. He described how the truck had been found days later, abandoned on the side of the road, the engine still running, but with no trace of either the driver or the mysterious hitchhiker. At that moment, as my eyes remained fixed on the road, I felt the atmosphere beside me change. I turned to ask Charlie a question, maybe to try and ease the tension his stories had created, or to see if he showed any sign that he was just messing with me. But when I glanced over at the passenger seat, he was gone. Charlie had disappeared. In the spot where he had been sitting, there were only his wet clothes, laid out in a way that almost seemed to have a human shape, as if the body that had been occupying them had evaporated, leaving behind only an empty shell. For a moment, I was frozen, my heart pounding so hard that its echo seemed to fill the cab of the truck. I swallowed hard, trying to rationalize what had just happened. I thought about stopping, about checking the clothes, searching for some clue that would give me a logical explanation. But something inside me, a quiet voice whispered by instinct, told me to keep driving, not to look back, and to leave the clothes and the memory of Charlie behind. I drove through the rest of the night in a nearly automatic state, my thoughts spinning between what was real and what might have been the result of exhaustion and the strange company I had kept. When I finally reached my destination, the sun was beginning to rise, casting light on the landscape that, after that night, would never look the same to me again. I left Charlie's wet clothes on a bench at a roadside rest stop, along with a note that read, "Be careful who you pick up." Maybe it was a warning for other drivers, or maybe it was just a way for me to say goodbye to that strange passenger and the terrible stories that, even now, still echo in my mind every time I hit the road.